Namaste, dear viewers. We extend hearty greetings to each one of you tuning in. Welcome to the sixth edition of Panorama, our digital newsletter. Today, we have the privilege of conversing with Dr. Swarnim, a visionary economist and development practitioner. His remarkable journey spans diverse roles and multiple institutions. Currently, he serves as an elected member of the Federal Parliament of Nepal. Previously, he has notably served as the Chief Economic Advisor at the UNDP Regional Bureau of Asia and the Pacific. His track record of leadership roles expands along with his experience of serving in the National Planning Commission of the government in Nepal as the Vice Chair. In addition, Mr. Wagle has served as the senior economist for the World Bank. Currently, he chairs one of the most prominent policy think tanks in South Asia, the Institute for Integrated Development Studies. Namaste, sir.
We're delighted to have you despite your very busy schedule. Sir, how have you?
Very well, very hectic. I'm trying to manage public life with private obligations. It's a bit of a challenge. Getting used to it.
We're glad to hear it was very well, and thank you for taking out time out of your very busy life to us.
So, now for the first segment of this interview, we'd like to get valuable insights on your academic and professional journey. Sir, reflecting on your early life and formative years, what are some key experiences from your time as a student?
Early on, my father was a teacher at Budanil Country School, so that's how I ended up studying there. Before my entrance in grade 4, I did study at other schools in Kathmandu, but from grade 4 until grade 13, which is the completion of A levels, I attended Budanil Country School for a whole decade, for 10 years. So the early sort of formative years, I think, were shaped by the kind of family, the kind of upbringing I was from, and the big premium in my family was on education. Right, my father himself had traveled for 5 days, used to walk for 5 days from Gorkha to Kathmandu because there were no roads at the time. So those early struggles of how education is possibly the only way for middle-class families from the rural hills to really, make your mark in the world. I think that was really imprinted on me. So I always had this goal of studying hard. And as the years went by, then our seniors won scholarships to universities in the UK or the US. So they inspired me. And a lot of my friends, batchmates as well. So I think about grade 7 or grade 8 onwards, we started to dream about being students abroad. And the fact that I studied at Budanil Country, which was a British assisted school, so we did have British teachers around. The headmaster was British until the time I left school. So all that, I think, really... So it was part inspiration, but it also created an enabling environment for folks who really wanted to focus on studies. But it was a boarding school environment, right? In the early days, it used to be called the Eton of the Himalayas. The original vision of Budanil Country was this very egalitarian school where from the crown prince to kids from the most humble background would study. And so it is a very diverse, we talk about Samavesi in Nepal. Budanil Country practiced this almost 50 years ago, and so it's part of that milieu, way ahead of our times in many respects. Then in the SLC, the School Living Certificate exam, this was in 1989, 1990, the country itself was transitioning from the Panchayat monarchical system to a multi-party system, and so the country's transition also overlapped with our own personal transitions, right? So, 46 Sal, which is very important milestone in Nepal's history. I took the SLC, and I hear this has disappeared now, and the SLC has been replaced by SCE, etc. But in our time, it was a very, very important exam that every kid in grade 10 used to take. And they used to publish these top 10 lists, and we used to get board Aune and all that. So the fact that I appeared on the board as with the second highest mark in the country, I think suddenly put additional pressure on me to keep performing. keep doing well in exams, etc. So from O levels, and then I did another 2 years of A levels in Botanical Gunter. And after SLC, sometime during the O levels, we got to study with some very prominent British teachers that had come as part of the British Foreign Aid. They were, based at Botanical Gunter. When a friend of mine and I showed interest in actually studying economics, rather than the conventional science stream that most young students who did well in the SLC exam would often choose, the school was very positive, and they responded to our requests. So for 2 years during our A levels, which is the grade that you guys are in, there were 2 students and 2 teachers over 2 years. Right, so it was an amazing investment that the school made for us, and we're very grateful for those kind of opportunities that opened doors for us. So I would say, just to sum up, the personal background, your own roots, is really decisive in the kind of direction, the level of ambition that you begin to hold, the dreams that you begin to see, and then the enabling environment that your family, as well as the school, the formal environment that gets created, ends up, I think, shaping the direction that one takes in life.
It was a very beautiful recall, at the same time very insightful. Now, starting off with your accomplishment of being board second in the SLC examination, what exactly can young students like us do to maximize our academic potential?
Be serious in what you do. But being serious doesn't mean you're not forbidden from having fun. You should go out, enjoy, all the extracurricular activities. It's shaping a well-rounded personality that really matters. And but having fun doesn't mean being frivolous and being silly and wasting a lot of time and goofing around as the teenagers say. I think that seriousness of purpose is very important if you want to go far in life, right? Sometimes people deviate from paths, and it's perfectly normal. Folks whose career paths get derailed in the early years have often come back, rebounded, and ended up doing very well. But I think that seriousness of purpose, what I want to do in life, or at least in the next 4 or 5 years, I think that should be clear. And if you chase that goal, do whatever it takes to accomplish those goals, right? And in these years, SLC, O levels, A levels, or 11 and 12, plus 2, whatever, this phase is important because we're preparing to go into college, right? And college, another 4 years of college is, as you grow wiser, older, beyond your teenage years, then you start to imagine what kind of career you're going to hold. So it's in stages, right? So I think at least at the stage you're in, O levels, A levels, you should start thinking about college and what kind of college I want to go into. Is it in Nepal? Is it in India? Is it in the United States? Is it elsewhere? What stream would you want to pursue? What would it take to get admitted to those schools? And often we Nepalis, our parents are not that rich, with a few exceptions, so we need scholarships. So not just getting admitted, but winning scholarships is also vital, right? So what would it take to accomplish those immediate goals? Because then after you enter a college of your choice, then the next phase begins, right? So the same applied to me. After SLC, as I indicated earlier, there was this pressure to now get into a good college. And those preparatory years, at least the 2 years of A levels, were really important. And the fact that we had gambled on a completely brand new stream of education, right? The science stream was well established. Economics and maths and further mathematics and English, that's the stream that we chose, that the school created for us very kindly. It was a huge gamble. It was, laden with many risks, and so which meant we had to be more serious than you would ordinarily have been if you had pursued a more conventional path.
So discussing your academic journey further, your educational background consists of credentials from prestigious institutions such as Harvard and the London School of Economics. So to what extent have these institutions fortified your abilities?
They shape who you are, they shape who you become. But there's also a pre-existing dilemma or an unsettled question. Is it that students who are already good and who would have excelled wherever they are, who end up in good schools, or do good schools have the capacity to even turn lousy students into smart ones? Right? My own belief is that students who end up in the top universities of the world are good already, right? So so sometimes you may miss an opportunity. Very smart kids from Nepal, who are probably smarter than me, or who did better than me in school in other years, through sheer bad luck, might have missed on these opportunities. And let's say they ended up studying at a school or a college in Nepal or India, but that latent talent is there, right? That hunger for knowledge, that drive, that ambition, if it's there, they're going to catch up sooner or later, right? So I do feel but having said that, the enabling environment, as I explained in the case of Budanil Kanta, is definitely very important. So being in that awesome environment, right? This academic rigor, the sense of history. The London School of Economics was 100 years old when I went there, but the Harvard was 350 years old, right? It was founded in 1636 when Ram Saha in Gorkha had just died, right? Harvard had been set up. It was initially called Cambridge College, and then John Harvard gave, some money and hundreds of his books, and then it was renamed Harvard College in 1638. So this is just after Ram Saha ruled in Gorkha, where I'm from, right? So, and that awesome history, the rigor, the wealth, the prestige does weigh on you. And so if you look at it positively, the fact that they're so well endowed, probably $50 billion now, more than the GDP of Nepal, and the wealth and the annual stream of incomes that they make from that massive endowment is spent as investment on the best faculty that they can attract. Students are often enrolled on a need-blind basis, right? So once you get in on merit, if your parents can't afford it, they give you a full ride, right? So that kind of environment. There are 99 libraries at Harvard. The biggest one is Widener, so grand in its scale. Similarly, at the London School of Economics, we had the largest social sciences library in the world, called the Lionel Robbins Library, right? So it just, that academic grandeur, the history, and the opportunities that come with that as a legacy is what you need to grab, right? That's very important. Similarly, I did my PhD much later. I paused my career and then went to the Australian National University. So again, a very prestigious university in its own right, but on the other side of the world, right? Down under, as they say it. But that was also a very pleasant experience for me, because Canberra as a city is very peaceful, very calm, very serene, and it helped pursue my PhD, which is often a very lonely exercise. It's often a solitary slog, as they say. So that also suited me. So all the three universities that I studied in after Budanil Kanta have shaped me as a person. At different stages of life, the priorities evolve, your ambitions evolve, you get to know yourself better, what you're good at, and perhaps identify areas where you're not as strong as in other areas. So that kind of self-respect, reflection, introspection, all that helps to fashion a career as you age, if I may say.
So in that case, what can young students like us do to cultivate that environment of academic excellence and innovation, similar to what's found in such top-tier schools?
I think that hunger for knowledge and that immediate goal of where you want to reach, how you're going to achieve, I think that's very important, right? And if you're aimless, if you are clueless, it's hard. And that sometimes it's not the fault of the student, and this is where mentors, teachers, the school environment becomes very important, right? To spot if certain student is wayward, is deviating from the path of normalcy, I think that's when the school administration, the teachers, have an extra responsibility. Parents, of course, very, very important in shaping their kids' careers. So that discipline and that sense of purpose, as I indicated earlier, is very important. Hunger for knowledge is also key. I come from a pre-internet era, right? It probably amazes you. So when I went to college in '93, we didn't really have mobile phones of the kind that we're using now. This came much later. Smartphones came 15 years later. And the internet, the World Wide Web had just begun in '95. So I remember being curious about what this beast is. And the London School of Economics in about '95, I think, when I sent my first email or had my email address. '95 or '96, I think it was quite early on. But the World Wide Web, which was actually a British invention, made me very inquisitive about the world. And Google came much later. So I remember entering google.com, the URL, and then making a search. I think this was in '99 when I was actually at Harvard, right? Because the company itself was set up by Stanford dropouts in '97, I think. So, but now the medium had changed, but the purpose hasn't, right? The hunger for knowledge. So in the old days, we used to go to the library, look up books, meet professors in their office hours and consult with them, be inspired by their stories, be guided by their recommendations. But now, you're with the internet, the entire knowledge is in your palms, figuratively. So the method is changing, the tools are changing, but the original purpose, as used to be the case in monastic kind of learning even 1,000 years ago, is that same old hunger for knowledge, to self-cultivate, to hone your personality for a purpose, right? There ought to be something that you are chasing all the time, and that's very important.
So sticking to academics, you mentioned that economics as a subject was uncharted territory in the Nepali context. Still, you courageously took a leap into this domain and it paid off. Are there any upcoming domains you'd like to see the youth bet on?
That's a very interesting question. I think the sciences, right, is very exciting, right? In my time, it was physics, chemistry, biology, well-trodden. There was nothing new or exciting. But the world is changing. The fourth industrial revolution that we're in. We're talking about artificial intelligence, data sciences, and all this, quantum computing and all that, sort of nanotechnology. So all that is, not that everything new is exciting. Some of these could just be a passing fad and it will just dissolve, right? But one does see that this amazing combination of multiple technologies, internet becoming ubiquitous, so everywhere, right? The fact that sensory chips are available everywhere, and smartphones, the access to smartphones is universal. So I think things that are embedded or enabled by new technologies would be exciting to get into. But mind you, economics would still help you, make the choices. So if you're a top engineer or a scientist or an IT guy, some knowledge of the humanities, some knowledge of the social sciences, and that inquisitiveness about the world, current affairs, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in China, India, East Asia. The climate change is becoming so important. So it's a new era that we are living in. If you take the whole humankind as a big continuum, the 21st century is going to be interesting. The economic forces are being reshaped. Countries that became relatively stagnant, yet were populous. Many of them in Asia. Half the population is in the Asia Pacific. So there's a gradual rebalance happening in terms of power, influence, voice, wealth. So it's a new world that we're inventing, and then all these big challenges like climate change, which is posing an existential threat on the planet that we live in, and then the technology. Where are the jobs coming from? Right? Where would one want to seek a meaningful career? Everything is in a flux, and this is where I think all the more important that you also become well versed in history, sociology, economics, political science, and all that. Even if you pursue a purely technocratic or technical path in the career that you opt for.
Now, you mentioned political science. So, speaking of uncharted territories, the political landscape of Nepal might not be characterized as rewarding. Despite this, why have you chosen to invest yourself in Nepali politics?
It goes back to the same old reason of why I chose economics as a field, right? So, if economics was not on offer in Budanil Country School, I would probably, not sure if I would gone, if I would have become a doctor or an engineer, but maybe engineer because I was pretty good in maths. And but I always felt that a good doctor or a good engineer, does wonderful things, right? A good doctor would save thousands of lives in his or her career. People like Upendra Devkota, a world famous neurosurgeon, did great things. Other famous doctors in Nepal right now who are doing wonderful things in heart surgery, in orthopedics, in pediatrics, in gynecology, and all that, right? So, and it must be a very fulfilling career for them, and this is what they have chosen to do. So it's wonderful. So I'm not going to judge, whether their chosen path is whether fits or aligns with my own interests. Similarly, a good engineer would have built so many things. A mechanical engineer, electronic engineer, computer engineer. In the case of Nepal, all the bridges and the roads were built by hundreds of civil engineers. So again, it could be a very fulfilling career. Once I was exposed to the world through some of the teachers that we had, the new teachers from England, I think my sort of horizon widened. And I sort of said, how about public administration, public affairs, taking reins of a country or being part of the process of governing an entire society. And then I got pulled into studying world history. It was an exciting time, early 90s, US elections were happening in 91, 92. Bill Clinton was just emerging as a likely potential presidential candidate. Nepal had just made that transition. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Communism had the influence had waned, and so it was an epic time looking back of so many transitions, right? And so that sense of history, things about the motions that societies uphold, intrigued me, all right, and inspired me, influenced me. And then that enabling environment came, where I said, well, if you are really serious about these issues, why don't you study it formally, and why don't you go into this path? That's how those choices were made then, and that's the same purpose that is bringing me to politics now. How to change society. I mean, I could be a technocrat in government, I could be a policy advisor, but that would always be a marginal or a tangential role. And I tried that, I did that, and I'm very proud of the tenure I had at the National Planning Commission. Initially as member and eventually as a vice chair, although the tenure was short-lived. And I felt this was the time I should be active in politics and be that decision maker myself, rather than being an advisor to somebody else. Why don't I test myself, among the electorate of Nepal? Should they trust me? Should they entrust me with the responsibility in governance? Then I'll take that chance. And fortunately, very fortunately, the wonderful people of Tanau elected me handsomely just a few months ago. And although I'm the opposition, so you can't do much in the Westminster kind of system that we have, we are doing our best, playing our part as a constructive opposition party, critiquing government where they have erred, and also appreciating government actions when it has been in the right direction, such as some recent moves against corruption and all that.
Although you have ventured into politics in recent years, the world knows you better as a distinguished economist. So, delving into economics, you've said that social progress can be pursued even in the absence of high GDP. In that case, how do you perceive the significance of income and wealth inequality as potential obstacles in Nepal's social progress?
It's a big issue for Nepal. So there's different metrics that one uses. So there's Gini coefficient to measure inequality. There's the Palma index. You compute these ratios of the top 10% divided by the bottom 40%. And they do tend to capture aspects that the Gini coefficient doesn't capture. And this can be a measure of income inequality or wealth inequality or even consumption inequality, right? Now, various iterations of the Nepal Living Standards Survey that CBS has been doing with the help of the World Bank. At one point, our inequality is even narrowed, and that is partly because of all the remittance inflows, all the public investments and social transfers that the government was making. But historically, if you go back to the days of Prithviraj Shah, there's a deep structural inequality in Nepal. You look around Kathmandu, folks who've inherited property without having done much, and the landed wealth. And in the old days, in the Rana days, they used to be given birta and all that. So even today, we have Nepali families who hold a lot of ancestral property in districts that they didn't really earn, right? So issues like that, it's subsiding, of course. Nepal has done different phases of land reforms. BP Koirala in his heyday raised this issue. King Mahendra also pursued this. And even in more recent years, I think there's been several land reform efforts. But nonetheless, and the caste dynamics, that certain caste groups were favored over others in terms of access to the state machinery, in terms of even educational opportunities. All that structural inequality has to be admitted, recognized, so that we can make improvements in those. And part of this inclusive polity project that we are in, under the new constitution of 2072 Sal, is actually a welcome step in the right direction in redressing some of those historical inequities that have been embedded into the national fabric, right? And that's what we're trying to redress through affirmative action, through mandated representation of women and certain caste groups, the Madesis, Janajatis, who have been historically underrepresented in the state machinery. So this is the kind of sort of a healthy, vibrant, inclusive democracy that we are trying to refine and hone in our country. Now, there is a school of thought within economics that maybe some income inequality is inevitable as the country catches up, because the entrepreneurs, folks with talent, they do march ahead, do wonderful things. They reap dividends and returns for their discoveries, etc. That is well justified as long as the state taxes them, and they are also contributing back to the society through job creation and through corporate social responsibility, etc. But the kind of inherited inequality, I think policy has a role to narrow those discrepancies. And this is where, again, educational opportunities, nutrition opportunities, health opportunities, social transfers would need to come in to blunt those discrepancies. We can never have a perfectly equal society. No society in history of mankind has ever achieved it. Somebody was telling me that that's possible only in the community of ants, Kamilako Duniyama Matre, but not in other not just mankind or humankind, but in other species as well. But the purpose of politics, purpose of a healthy political economy, the objective of all the exercise of public policy ought to narrow these gaps, because ultimately an unequal society leads to conflict. An unequal society leads to civil or civic discord, and that hampers the economic progress. And even the rich folks, it's in the interest of the richer, of the well-to-do folks, to take care of the less fortunate, because they themselves would not be safe in a society that is full of strife and discord.
So moving from problems to strategies, we know that foreign aid is important for any developing economy. Considering your experience in international development, especially in the context of South Asia, how exactly would you recommend Nepal utilize its foreign aid?
It should complement national resources, right? So there's no country in the world which has developed just because they've had foreign aid. So foreign aid has a catalytic role, right? So if folks say, "Oh, we'll bring all the money from outside, or charitable, concessional finance, and we'll develop," that's not going to happen. A lot of countries that have made it, that have developed within a short span, have done it by marshalling their own resources, which is not just fiscal resources. It could be natural capital. It almost definitely requires human capital. So unless people or the citizens of that country really feel that we need to do something about our state of progress, no amount of visionary leadership, no amount of good integrity on the part of politicians or sheer competence on the part of the bureaucrats is enough to pull the country up. But once that is there, then foreign aid can complement those efforts. Because our own domestic savings is often inadequate because the needs are so big, right? All the infrastructure that we need to fund, all these massive investments in the health infrastructure, education infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, institution building, norm setting, all that is needed as part of a nation building exercise. It's simply not enough for a poor country like Nepal to do it on its own. So this is where we need to access foreign ideas, foreign capital, and foreign technical assistance. And that is what Nepal has been utilizing. I mean, not to say that all foreign aid that we've received has been used wisely, but if you look at all the key physical infrastructure that have been built, the airports, the highways, a lot of the hydro plants of the early days, pre-1990, all of them were foreign funded. The landmark Mahendra Rajmargas were almost entirely foreign funded. And there's actually a beautiful story of partnership there. The Hughes segment, I think 70-80% was built with Indian assistance, but there is a component there built with American assistance from Naranghat to Hetauda, and then there's a Russian component from Patlaya to Dalkebar, and the Brits built the Dharan-Dankuta highway. The Chinese built the Kathmandu-Pokhara segment and all that, right? So, when I was growing up, when I was your age, I was very curious about all this. These days, we build a lot of our bigger infrastructure with concessional loans from institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and there are other new sources that are coming up. In the social sector, a lot of grant money has played a big role, right? Building of schools. Budanilkanta School was a British grant, right? The laboratory school in Kirtipur was an American grant, right? The Swiss have helped us in Jiri, for example. So there's dozens and dozens of examples where foreign assistance, when wisely utilized, has been in the interest of Nepal. But there's also been a lot of squandering, waste, corruption, and how this has actually crept into the system and weakened our internal machinery, and maybe we've become more dependent in certain areas, and that's not been healthy for our self-esteem or even for our internal functioning as a nation state. So a periodic introspection of where we've done it right and where we've made mistakes, I think would be very important to take stock and then refine, reform, and move ahead. Looking ahead, I think we still need big amounts of assistance in physical infrastructure. It's chronically starved. The infrastructure deficit is very heavy. But in this sort of the institution building exercises within the government, I think we should rely on our own internal resources. That's my view.
So talking about the dependence on foreign aid, how could we strike a balance between utilizing external help and not being overly reliant on it, if that you would consider?
So we have to get our economy going so that our own tax base is strong, right? Right now, our tax to GDP ratio is actually quite good. It's around more than 20-21%. which compared to Sri Lanka or Pakistan or India or even Bangladesh, all our neighboring countries, is a much higher ratio. But once you unpack that ratio, then you immediately see that it's a very vulnerable position, because a lot of that taxation is derived from the financial punitive or the taxation that we place on imports. And a lot of the imports, the heavy imports, are fueled by the inward remittances that a lot of young Nepalis send back home. And since we don't yet have a vibrant production base, almost everything that we consume is imported. So you tax that, right? The value-added tax, the customs tax, the excise tax, and that has become a huge component of our internal revenue. So it's fine for the moment, but once the remittances start to dwindle and import flows start to fluctuate, it would immediately become a very, very unstable source of taxation. So the idea would be to strengthen our domestic source of taxation from diversified sources, enroll many folks who are now in the informal sector through lower tax burden, encourage, nudge, incentivize folks to be formal, be recognized, and that's the direction we ought to be moving in, and that can come from the deep economic reforms that are way overdue in the context of Nepal.
Now, talking further about development, we know that innovation is crucial for any progress. And in context of Nepal, Nepal has its own set of opportunities and constraints. Could you share an example of an industry or a sector where innovation is playing a transformative role in Nepal?
There's innovation that is really cutting edge. There's, it's fueled by R&D investments of a massive proportion, on the part of the big corporate giants, or even state-propelled R&D investments of the kind that many rich countries make, right? Then there's this other kind of innovation, which is mostly actually imitation or borrowing tried and tested off-the-shelf technologies, right? So that's more about adopting pre-existing technologies. It would be very presumptuous for Nepal to say that we're going to, invent the internet. Or launch a rocket to the moon, or do some amazing stuff in nanotechnology, right? Because the foundations are very weak. I mean, we may get a genius somewhere, it could be in Mahattari or it could be in Dailek, but that would be an exception. It wouldn't come from this system, of education, this ecosystem that we have. It would be very difficult to imagine lots of inventors, innovators, top scientists coming out of the current system. That should be our goal, but it's an eventual goal, right? That's the target that we should be chasing. But there's a lot of areas where just a smart adoption of technologies and applying those technologies to our domestic circumstances, right? Let's say the Israelis have done wonderful stuff on farming in the desert, right? This drip irrigation and all that. Maybe some of that technology could be. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just take that technology, reorient it, and adapt it. So adopt it and then adapt it to the Nepali circumstances, right? So in my own constituency in Tanavu, I see these mighty rivers, Himalayan rivers, the Madi, the Marsyangdi, the Seti Gandaki and all that flowing through my constituency. And just 20 meters above in these tars, it's so dry, right? So maybe there's something we could do there, lift irrigation or lift drinking water projects based on technologies that already exist. I think that should be our focus, rather than trying to be the next Silicon Valley in a country where so much else is lacking, where you don't have good roads, where the patent system is dysfunctional, intellectual property regime is not robust enough, electricity is unreliable, and you don't have that community of peers and scientists to make these things happen. You might have seen a recent movie, Oppenheimer, how the atomic bomb was built, You need that whole ecosystem, government, brilliant community of scientists, financial wherewithal, the logistics provided by the army, for example, everything coming into a nice confluence to achieve the goal that they had set out for in the course of the so-called Manhattan Project in the context of the Second World War. So we need these Manhattan Project-like ambitions in other areas, in health, in universal access to clean energy, in education, in universal access to portable drinking water and sanitation, etc. Right? Yeah.
Expanding the topic of innovation itself, we know that for a democracy, the agents of innovation are its leaders. Now, from your nuanced insights and experiences, what exactly are those traits that carve out a good leader?
So the earlier elaboration on innovation was more to the scientific realm. Now you're asking about the political field, innovation, or ingredients of good leadership. I think vision is very important. The leaders need to be ahead of the curve. Leaders need to be ahead of the mass, right? It cannot be the case that the mass is dictating the direction that the leader is taking. So all the visionary statesmen or women that we've seen in history have always been ahead of the times. And so that clarity of vision of where you want to take the country, the nation, your followers, is very, very important, right? And to articulate that vision, to convince fellow citizens is extremely important. It cannot be a wild, crazy, non-credible vision. It has to be an achievable vision, maybe a bit ambitious, that I'm going to take this country up to this point within a certain defined time frame. And it has to be credible. And the way a vision becomes credible is through the leader's own personality. Does he have the right kind of integrity? Is it some corrupt fool who has failed at every opportunity that he or she has been given? Or has that particular leader, demonstrated that given the chance, he or she has actually delivered in the past, very competently, executed the mandate that he or she has received with the kind of integrity that we expect in our top leadership. So the vision, the integrity, the ethical part, the moral dimension to leadership is very important, because that's what instills the confidence in the millions of followers that he or she would need to command to be able to transform societies, right? And then sheer competence. And by competence, I don't mean how well you can do your maths, or how well you can compose a poetry, or even deliver a speech. Although oratory and communication skills is exceptionally important, because if you have the vision, you do need to communicate that in a way that folks understand, right? So it's an amalgamation of skills. But if I were to prioritize the key ingredients, I'd say a vision, integrity, and competence of some managerial competence. But even good leaders can hire managers that are better skilled than them. So it's not always the case that leaders themselves are good at managing big organizations like a political party. But they do need to be humble enough to know that certain areas need to be delegated to folks with better skills and all that. So I would say, vision, integrity, competence.
So for the next segment of this interview, we will now address our viewers' most requested questions. Starting off with, sir, do you think that the consumer is right mindset has largely eroded from the Nepalese economy?
Consumer
Is right mindset.
I don't think our society gives much importance to what the consumer's rights are, right? I mean, if you look at the way the businesses behave, I don't see practices that seem to put the consumer at the center, right? And by this I mean, take a very mundane stuff. If you purchase a certain good, if it turns out to be shoddy, second rate, do you get refunded, or do you get bullied out of the store? It's bad luck. It was all doing fine before you. So this is a very basic, mundane thing, example. But in terms of consumer rights, if you look at where this is practiced very rigorously in the West, for example, folks go to jail for deceiving consumers, for misleading consumers, for cheating consumers, right? So I don't think consumers are always right. But having said that, I don't think we've placed consumers in the place that they deserve to be in our society.
So, and would you see asymmetric information as any role to play in it?
Asymmetric information, I mean, it's a fact of life. Sometimes service providers have better information than the consumers, and this is where the state needs to come, right, and mandate producers and folks who provision services to be very transparent about what it entails. And this is again another mundane example. You get a packet of noodles or even a bar of soap. Look at the back. There's all the detailed information. What are the ingredients that go into making that product? When is the date, the expiry date, right, beyond which you shouldn't consume that product? All that has been legislated from the perspective of protecting the consumer. That they consume healthy food, safe products, and all that, right? So that is one way of redressing asymmetric information. If you just place a bar of soap here, who knows that it has toxic chemicals and all that? And if it indeed has toxic elements in it, then the legal system ought to be able to give you that opportunity to seek redress, right? And those folks, if they've really violated the law of the land, they ought to be jailed and all that. So asymmetric information exists, and it is the duty of public policy to make sure that asymmetry is reduced, just like we talked about reducing inequalities. The asymmetry has to be reduced in the interest of the consumer so that they are well informed, better informed than would otherwise be the case before procuring those services or before spending their resources on whatever. So this is a vital aspect of creating a healthy market economy.
So, and next, for you, what does it take to build a country?
It starts with leadership, like I explained earlier. So it's always, you can have good doctors, you can have good engineers, but unless you have good politicians who really have that ambition to take a country forward, reach a certain milestone within a defined time frame, country becomes stagnant, right? But just having good politicians and good leaders is not enough. You need good institutions to enable that environment, right? So, and institutions is both in the perspective of hard institutions. So these are organizations, all the sasthas that we talk about, constitutional bodies, the parliament, the judiciary, but also the softer institutions and infrastructure, which is in the form of laws, regulation, norms that the society adopts and all that. So it's the mixture of institutions and infrastructure, both legal and physical and economic, that would allow a good batch of politicians to function and deliver. And this includes, of course, a very competent bureaucracy that is meritocratic, that is well motivated to really help deliver the political vision that the elected politicians have set out for the country.
Now, for the next segment of this interview, we would like to capture your responses across various topics through a very short, rapid-fire round. Please tell us a country that you would choose to gain the following economic elements from if you were to create an ideal economy. Long-term planning and stability.
Well, there are a lot of success stories, that have performed within our lifetimes. A lot of East Asian countries have made miraculous economic progress, but I still find them wanting from the perspective of political freedom, because I'm a liberal Democrat. I do want societies to be free, and for individuals to make choices that are not encumbered by the rigidities that the regime imposes on you. Right? I think the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, has always sort of inspired me to pursue a balanced development course where we have a very vibrant private sector that is creating wealth, creating jobs, paying lots of taxes to the government. And on the other hand, you have a well-funded welfare state, a lok kalyankari rajya that really takes care of the poor, that really takes care of folks who are not in the mainstream of opportunities, right? In terms of health, nutrition, education, environmental protection, affordable public housing, affordable transport, all that investment where the market often underprovides and the state would definitely need to come in and make those redresses. You need the financial wherewithal to pull it off. And that comes from a very private, very sort of vibrant private sector. So this balanced approach to sustainable development is something that I think Nepal can learn from. But a lot of this cannot be superimposed, right? These things need to be adopted and adapted to our own milieu, to our own domestic context, because we carry a specific historical, cultural, economic burden, and how to excavate those opportunities while being clear on the path that we ought to take and be inspired by successful examples elsewhere is very important. Not quite the rapid answer that you are seeking, but these things are easy to, are not easy to answer.
So let's move on to our final segment.
For this final segment of this interview, we only have one question. So would you like to impart some final words of wisdom for our viewers who are young individuals much like us?
I usually refrain from, advising folks or giving them, these are the 7 steps to progress and then folks following that blindly, because everybody is unique. Circumstances are different, potentials are different, but should the enabling environment be there, the right kind of nudges coming from family, society, schools, be inquisitive, be curious, be hungry for knowledge, but don't pursue knowledge just for the sake of pursuing it. See how that can be applied, used. And in the course of that pursuit, and that would lead to a career, right? It could be a physicist, a novelist, a theater critic, a chef, a rocket scientist, whatever career that you end up pursuing, those foundations will help you succeed. But never forget that together with that pursuit of what you perceive to be a meaningful, successful career, building of character is extremely important, right? The kind of person you are is exceptionally important. And this is where, again, ethical values, the sense of integrity, the fact that you are conscious about the society that you live in. Do you have a sense of giving back, being a constructive citizen to contribute to society in a way that is beyond your personal ambitions, right? So can you rise above your own, your personal accomplishments to contribute to society in durable ways so that they can even, take form of very inspirational legacies, right? So personal success is important, but how you leverage your personal success and accomplishments and fame and fortune for the larger good of the society that you come from, with which your identity is intricately linked, is very, very important, I think. So I think that well-rounded character, personality, the values that you embody is very, very important, alongside the more technicalities of professional success.
So that was a very thoughtful and inspiring response. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Swarnim, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. Your journey exemplifies the power of visionary thinking in shaping economic progress and creating a positive impact beyond boundaries. We are certain our viewers will learn immensely from your valuable words. Thank you, sir.
A pleasure to have engaged in this conversation with you. Thank you.